Hi, my name is Shane Lucero, and this is my Spanish language and cultural contact presentation number 3. So briefly, my table of contents. So I do 4 hours of Spanish contact. So I spent the majority of time with Duolingo, the podcasts, and the app. And then some time on the CDC webpage, specifically on the CDC's webpage that was focusing on washing hands. So Duolingo. So I listened to 3 podcasts. The first one that I listened to is the most recent one, La Testigo, which is The Witness. So it talks about this girl who when she was growing up, she had a friend. Anyway, she went over to her friend's house, and it turns out like her friend's dad was like the director of like this military organization, and she talks about how like she was like searched when she got to the house, and then when she was playing with her friend, like her friend showed her like her dad the dad's room, and there's like all these guns and like a grenade, like I think it was like under the pillow or something crazy like that. And she remembers while she was there seeing like someone like almost like being led prisoner to the house, and so that was really puzzling for her. And then talks about how like she grew up, and later like it comes out like this house that she was at was like a large compound, and basically like I guess it was like a secret like military prison. Um, so she basically learns that like she was witnessing like basically being brought there and being tortured. She like witnessed someone being brought there to be tortured, and so that was traumatic for her. And so she talks about how like growing up, like she kind of had to deal with that. She went to school to be a teacher, and um, eventually she became involved with human rights groups, and so she worked with them, um, kind of to help promote that. And so it was a really interesting podcast. She talks about how like she lost contact with that friend eventually, and um, how the man at the house that she was at, the dad, I guess he eventually like died, moved out of like they fled the country, and he eventually died. So he never like faced his crimes. But yeah, it was pretty interesting. The second podcast I listened to is called Shakespeare in La Montañas. So it talks about this guy, him and this girl that he likes are like finishing up like their last year in college, and they're doing this degree. I think it's like an education, and basically, like they are like bummed out that there's like not enough like art involved in their degree. Like they didn't learn much about like art, and music, and theater. And so like this comes up like this like opportunity to go basically like teach people like and help people like do a play, like an initial play at a theater in like a different part of this takes place in Venezuela in the mountains. And so this guy and this girl jump on this opportunity, and it becomes like this like kind of like finding himself moment for this guy. Basically like he learns that like he really enjoys the theater and enjoys connecting with people and trying to like explain his story, and his like talent is like music, and so he uses music to really connect with people. um, so I thought that was really interesting. and talks about how like he went there for the girl, but basically that didn't end up working out. Like she ended up having to leave the project because like a family member got sick, and so she had to go back and like care for the family member. But he like stayed there and like found his love for theater and the arts, and like at the end of the podcast, you learn like that's what he does now. He's like a theater director. So I thought that was pretty interesting as well. And then the last one that I listened to was La Voz de la Calle. So it talks about this guy who kind of like, it takes place in Argentina. And it talks about kind of, I guess, during a time when there was a lot of people just living on the streets. And it talks about this guy who like seemed like he had all together, like wife and kids and all this stuff, and then like a financial difficulty hit. And so like there was a divorce, and like then he was like kind of just like left on the like ended up on the streets, and kind of like he never thought that would happen to him. He ended up spending like 9 years on the streets. And talked about his experience on the streets, and trying to get off the streets. And eventually one day, he like found he was recommended to go to this shelter, and the shelter like was teaching people skills. One of the skills they were teaching is like radio and like interviewing and that sort of thing. And so it kind of talks about how he like really got into that interviewing, and like his segment, like it was a radio station at the shelter, and his segment was like kind of like political and like more like, you know, like telling like the human rights, like, hey, there needs to be better shelters, that sort of thing. And so he like interviewed people, like he started taking like a tape recorder with him. And so like he got this opportunity to interview like the mayor of the city, and like a year later this mayor became like the president of the whole country. And so like and he got to be this guy got to be pretty well known for his radio segments, and he's off the streets, but uh, he called his radio show like the La Voz de la Calle. Like he continues to focus on the struggles that are theirs that homeless folks face in Argentina. So that was really cool. Again, I really enjoy these Duolingo podcasts because they have such they tell such great stories, and like definitely lots of cultural practice and nuances, more than obviously I've listed here. So I mean, talked about Argentinian Spanish, how the double L's and the Y's have a SH sound. So I thought that was really interesting, kind of thinking too, like Spain Spanish also has different sounds. So just a good reminder to me that just like English, just because you speak the same language doesn't necessarily mean you're using the same sounds, or you might even understand each other, because sometimes things sound completely different. Again, really emphasize that family is important, community is important too. One of the things in the La Voz de la Calle, it talked about the rancheras, which are like small homeless communities, and how that was such an important part, because in the streets you could feel so isolated. And of course, different areas of Spanish-speaking countries had different customs. So like in Shakespeare in La Montañas, one part of Venezuela was known for like being really introverted, which compared to like, I guess, you know, typically when I think of like someone like a Spanish person, I usually think of like outgoing people. But yeah, it's just good to remember that there's just lots of differences, same as with English. People who speak English, there are areas of the country where people are, you know, have a certain reputation for being like really polite or that sort of thing. I'm just thinking like of the US. Vocab, Coca-Cola in botellas individuales, so Coke in bottles, like individual bottles. I thought that was interesting. Maestra, teacher. Los grupos de derechos humanos, human rights groups. Perdimos el contacto, like we lost contact, like people don't like talk to each other anymore, and they just lose contact. El proyecto, the project. El taxi, the taxi. Sin casa ni lugar donde vivir, so no, like person doesn't have a house or place to live. and Parador shelter. So yeah, spent some time with the app too. Uh, Usually with the app, I haven't got as far as I want to get with the app, but been learning basically a lot of phrases similar to what we've learned currently. Just greetings, basic vocab like food, basic vocab like about places to travel, la playa, that sort of thing. Um, Different modes of transportation. So that's that. Um, yeah, I also spent quite a bit of time with the CDC, Los Manos Limpias Salvan Vidas. So it means clean hands save lives, which I thought was super. I don't know. I thought it was cool. Again, so I work in healthcare. I'm a nurse, so I mean, this is so true. And I thought one of the coolest things was when it started out like talking about it. It's like, hey, this is basically like one way to give yourself a vaccination just by like washing your hands, like protects you against the microbes, the germs out there. Um, Vocab, los microbios equals microbes, jabón, soap, la buena hygiene, good hygiene. Um, en la mayoría de las situaciones, the majority of situations, in algunos casos, in some cases, mantenga la calma, keep calm. I thought it was funny. They had one of those like they have a bunch of the CDC in addition to all the information they had. So like information they had was basically like they gave you in Spanish the directions on how you should wash your hands. Like first they focused like on when. So what when should like after touching trash, before handling food, after going to the bathroom, like all those different scenarios about like when you should wash your hands, and then also very good instructions in Spanish about how to wash your hands. Um, and then it even talks about like the different types of soaps, and again when you should use like hand sanitizer versus when you should use soap. Like if you don't have any obvious soiling on your hands, then it's good to use hand sanitizer. So I thought that was all good. And then what I really liked is they have like tons of handouts too, like education handouts that are kind of like sciencey focused, and there's just some like funny handouts, like the keep calm. There's one that just said keep calm and wash your hands, but in Spanish. And I thought that was cool just to see like all the different ways that this is like one of the most important ways that you can prevent getting sick, getting someone else sick. And I'll have to say that I don't feel like the CDC Spanish website is necessarily the greatest place to pick up on cultural practices or nuances. But I do feel like they did try to emphasize like science and also protecting family, which that seems to be a common theme, I think, across all cultures, is that you want to protect family, especially the kids. And there's definitely a focus on that. One of the handouts is specifically all about teaching your kid in Spanish, teaching a kid how to wash your hands, and like talk about how like washing hands is like this when you're starting out. It like for a kid, it's like fun. It's like a fun thing to do. So yeah, spent a good bit of time with that. Really enjoyed that, and it's immediately helpful to me in my job because it's one thing I can teach patients in Spanish that can really make a difference, like right away. So it was really good for me to do that. So in summary, I continue to enjoy my Spanish contact hours. I learned quite a bit about culture from the Duolingo podcasts, improved my general vocab a little bit with the Duolingo app, learned important healthcare vocabulary from the CDC on hand washing, and I know better how to properly instruct someone on washing their hands in Spanish.